Welcome to Mastering the Real Estate. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio, and we are here today with Brian Davis. Brian Davis is actually today in Lima, Peru, and we're going to learn a lot about his story and why he gets to travel and make money at the same time. I just love it. I'm super excited. Let's welcome Brian into the group here. Hi, Brian.
Debbi, it's so much fun to be here. It's great to chat with you.
So excited to have you here. All right, I'm going to properly introduce you. Brian Davis is a real estate investor, personal finance writer, and co-founder of SparkRental.com. With over 2 decades in the real estate and finance industries, he owns an interest in over 2,000 units, adding more each month in a form of dollar cost averaging. In addition to hosting the Live Off Rents podcast, Brian regularly contributes as a real estate and personal finance expert for Bigger Pockets, Inman, Best Ever Real Estate, Tipster, and more. Brian started his career working for a hard money lender and saw firsthand how investing can build wealth and passive income. He started buying rental properties, albeit without knowing what he was doing, and gradually learned how to do it better. Today, Brian invests passively, going in with other investors on fractional property deals through a real estate investment club. He leaves direct ownership to people who want a real estate side hustle. Along with his wife and daughter, Brian spends most of the year overseas living by his own rules. He loves hiking, cooking, traveling, scuba diving, and occasionally surfing badly. Most of all, he loves showing others how they too can create their ideal lives through investing and lifestyle design. Oh my God, it sounds so exciting. I'm sure everyone is like, tell me, how can I live this life that Brian lives? It is so incredible. So, okay, before we go forward, because I have so many questions and I was on your website and I was reading all of the topics you like to talk about, but I love to travel as well. And I love the whole thing of work from anywhere. And so I just want to hear how you do it. But first, let's paint me a picture. You're currently in Lima, Peru, and tell me where you grew up. Did you go to college, and what was your journey to Rental? And then we'll go deeper into that.
Yeah, big questions.
I know.
So I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and I
Okay.
went to University of Delaware. And I graduated UD in 2003. So I'm obviously updating myself here a little bit, but I had no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated college, as a lot of young people don't, right?
Same.
So
Yep.
my stepdad was friends with a guy who was it was a co-owner of a subprime mortgage lending company, which, nowadays is a bad word, but in 2003, that was all the rage, right? They were like saving
Right.
the world and stuff, and like helping the little guy get loans. Um,
Right.
so anyway, I went to work for this guy as a summer intern, basically because I didn't know what else to do after graduating college. And at the end of
Wow.
that summer, he and his partner offered me a full-time job, but not doing subprime mortgage work. They offered me a job working directly for the two of them because they had a side hustle as hard money lenders at the time, and they
Okay.
didn't need another subprime mortgage loan officer. What they needed was someone to handle their hard money loans. So I said, well, I don't really know anything about hard money loans, but why not? Let's do it. So, over the next few years, this is really the real estate bubble in the mid aughts. So I'm working with nothing but real estate investors, mostly house flippers, some burr investors, and I'm watching these guys just make money hand over fist, right? So, I'm sitting there thinking like, I'm smarter than these guys. Like, I can make a bunch of money in real estate investing too. So I went out and I put every cent that I could spare into rental properties and way overpaid and just made every mistake you could possibly make in the book. I was young and arrogant and had just nothing but hubris, didn't get a mentor, just every mistake. I mean, just horrible. And then 2008 hit me like a ton of bricks. So not
Yeah.
only did I lose my day job because no one's borrowing hard money loans anymore in 2008, but also all my investments collapsed. So, and
My,
these rental
wow.
properties went from kind of like barely breaking even because I had over leveraged them, to being cash flow negative, and I had all these rent defaults, and it was just a total nightmare. It was a mess.
Mhm.
So that was how I got into real estate.
That's incredible. Um, so how did you pivot from that? I mean, you're now in 2008, 2009. Now, did you sell those properties or did you lose them? What happened at that time?
I wish I'd sold them. I ended up kind of holding on to them by my fingernails until much later. And, after I moved overseas many years later from that, I wish I'd sold them, back in 2008. I mean, I would have taken losses
Yeah.
on them, but it would have saved me a lot of headaches and trouble. Um, that being said, you look back over your career and you're like, well, that was painful at the time, but it laid the path for all these other things that ended up being great. So, for example, I went through all that pain and suffering with the,
Right.
all that
Yeah.
collapsing, but another window opened, right? As they say. And I took a job with an e-commerce company that was selling legal forms to landlords and real estate investors. And the only
Okay.
reason I got that job was because I myself was a landlord. So,
Right.
your previous mistakes do pave the way for future opportunities.
Absolutely.
And then I worked for that company for 8 years probably.
Oh,
And
wow.
that exposed me to the whole world of online marketing and digital products. And that company ended up expanding into tenant screening reports and all these other things. And I got to be there through all that and work for a startup. And I grew to become their vice president. And it was fun. And I got to see a whole nother side of the industry. And in 2016, after I had moved abroad, a colleague of mine from that company, she and I split off and started our own company, SparkRental, which at the
Oh, okay.
time, yeah. So we, SparkRental has been through many iterations over the years, yeah, a lot of different business models. But at the time, we thought that our main business was going to be creating a one-stop shop software platform for mom and pop landlords, basically, which she and I both were at the time. And we felt like there wasn't really a good software platform at the time for people who worked an unrelated job, but had a couple of rental properties on the side. So anyway, we thought we were going to be a software business, but neither one of us is a technical founder. So that that was it's a whole nother story. Um, but that is how owning a small business goes. Is early on, a mentor of ours taught us like what you think your business is not necessarily what the market or your potential clients think your business should be. So you have to
Okay.
listen. You have to listen to the market. You have to listen to your potential clients, and we have over the years, and we've you know evolved and produced a lot of different products and services over the years, and that's part of the journey and it's part of the fun. So
Right. Well, so you were so after the crash, then you started the job with the e-commerce company, and then were you working with them when you moved abroad?
I
You said,
was. So, yeah, I'll back up for 1 second here. My wife is a school counselor. So we met in Baltimore, and she worked for U.S. schools at the time doing counseling. But she knew that I had some wanderlust and I wanted to do some traveling. And she also wanted to do some more traveling. So she signed up with a recruiting service for international schools. So, because there's this whole network of international schools around the world,
right.
American schools and European schools and English schools, and they all need people who know that world, and they pay really well, and they provide free furnished housing and full premium health care
Nice.
for the whole family and paid flights home every year. And that's the world that we've been living in for the last decade, and it's been great. It's been awesome.
That's
Um, but so
so
we're
that
actually we're
so so I want to ask, so it's because of her job that it was made available for you to travel and to move because of all these perks she got from her job?
Yeah, so I was working for this e-commerce company at the time. It was a 100% remote job,
Oh,
and
it was.
I
Okay.
figured,
Right.
I can move across the world. What's the difference? So she took a job. My wife took a job in Abu Dhabi, and we
Oh,
moved
okay.
over there. And it turns out my boss didn't have the same feeling about that I did. He did not really like the fact that I had moved across the
Oh,
world. Uh, so yeah, he and I we had always kind of butted heads a little bit, but we
yeah.
parted ways about 6 months after I moved abroad, uh, which was fine. That was around the time that I really wanted to go off and start my own company, which I did with a coworker of mine from that business, that company.
Oh,
So,
okay.
but to answer your original question, yes, I did have a full-time remote job before moving abroad. Um,
Okay. I like to hear
And
the nuts and bolts because I want people to, there's always like, how were they able to do that? So it does help. It's like, it's not, you had a partner that helped with that. You were able to work remote. It just, gives people an idea of you can maneuver to do these things. Cause I'm sure there's a lot of people who, like you, want to live abroad and work and enjoy life while you're making money.
yeah, so that's something that people ask me about a lot, and I do a lot of writing about as well. As a side hustle, I'm a freelance writer about personal finance and travel and real estate. Um, and what I always tell them is the biggest piece of the puzzle is income from anywhere. You solve that
Okay.
piece, and the rest falls into place pretty easily. So go take a remote job or figure out a way to create your own streams of income that you control, either as a small business person or as a freelancer or gig worker, which is what I do now, of course. But find a way to earn money from anywhere in the world, and then the rest is actually pretty easy. In fact, the hardest part of moving overseas, that income piece aside, is actually not getting set up in the new country. It's tying up all the loose ends from your home country.
Right.
That's the harder.
So we're
So
going to
your
take a
existing
quick
home,
commercial.
car. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Sorry.
No, it's okay. We're going to take a quick commercial break because I'll never stop talking and asking questions. But, and then I want to come back. I want to dive into Spark Rental and understand your whole business. And I also want to talk, if we could, about how you live abroad and taxes are handled generally, when you're living abroad, that it would be so interesting to do. But then you hear that there's a lot of tax problems. So we'll be right back with Brian Davis and SparkRental.com. Welcome back to Mastering the Art of Real Estate. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio. We are here with Brian. Brian is with SparkRental.com, and he comes to us today from Lima, Peru. I love that you get to travel around and live in new places and make money. So I want to let's dive into your company, Spark Rental. I know there was a lot on your website, and just tell us about it and how people can get involved with you if that's a possibility. So let's start there.
Yeah. So I mentioned that we thought that our business was going to be property management software, basically, and it was for a little while. But what we had been doing at the time is we had started selling online courses and teaching people how to invest in real estate, and we kept getting the same question over and over again, which was like, hey, I'm not ready to buy a property by myself just yet, but I want to get involved. Like, can I just partner with you guys on a deal that you guys are doing? And we kept saying no. I mean, we must have said no 50 times to people who asked this question. There I was preaching like, oh, listen to the market. And here we were not listening to the market, right? So, at a certain point, my partner and I looked at each other like, well, maybe we should actually take this seriously and think about this. And we had felt kind of out of alignment because we were teaching real estate investing, but neither one of us was actually buying rental properties at the time. I mean, I was living overseas, and my partner was no longer actively buying rental properties herself. So I had started investing passively in syndications and crowdfunding platforms and some of that sort of thing. And we wanted to do a couple pilot deals just to see if this would even work. So we took some of our course students and we partnered with a boots on the ground real estate investor in Michigan. And we did a couple deals with him, and it was fine, but it was just way too much work. I mean, we weren't making like an extra cut or any of
Right.
these deals. So it was a lot of work, but no money. And it was great because it was hands on and it was educational for our students. But it just the economics of it were not there, right? I mean, we're
Right.
doing all this work and not getting paid for it. So we went kind of back to the drawing board, and we were like, well, we like this idea, and we're getting nothing but good feedback from our students about this. They like it, but that's too much work. So what if we tried a passive real estate investment instead? So, I had just at the time invested in my first real estate syndication just passively as an LP, as a limited partner. And I was like, well, we could try that. So we did a pilot deal, a pilot syndication deal, and it went well. It was popular with our students. So then we thought, well, do we have to just confine this to our students? Like, could we open this up to our broader audience and to the public at large? So we sat down with an attorney and we're like, well, actually, can we do that? Like, is that legal? um, and he signed off on it. So we started what we called the co-investing club. So
Okay.
we are like an old school investment club that gets together every month. We vet different investments. We go in on them together. Our unique spin on that is that we only do passive real estate investments. Now, sometimes that's real estate syndications. It could be a private note, could be a debt fund or an equity fund. It could be a private partnership with an operator. But it's always some kind of hands-off real estate investment, because we're all busy professionals who don't necessarily want to be landlords. I know I never want to be a landlord again. I hated it. we already talked about that.
Yeah.
But I love real estate. I want to have a lot of it in my portfolio, but I want it all to be completely passive. I just want to wire the money and then watch the distributions come in, basically. So that's what we do. Together as an investment club, we meet online every month. We invite an operator to come in and present their current investment, and we all grill them together as an investment club. We got 50, 60 people on the call, all slinging questions at the operator. And
Wow.
then after the operator gets off the call, we all talk about it and say, well, how do you feel about this? What are the risks? What are the advantages? Pros, cons, and we all just kind of share our thoughts and feedback about it. And then
Nice.
anyone who wants to go in on that investment can do so with $5,000 or more. And that might sound like a lot if you've never invested in a syndication. But the typical minimum investment for these is 50 grand to 100 grand. So
Yeah.
our idea here is to make it possible to diversify and buy a lot of these every year instead of only investing in maybe one or two of these a year. Because it's really hard to diversify if you have to park 50 grand or 100 grand at a time in each investment, right? And that same principle applies if you're buying rental properties too. I mean, if you're going out and buying a rental property, you're going to pay 50 or 100 grand between the down payment and the closing costs and the cash reserves and all that. So this is a way for people to invest relatively small amounts in real estate and diversify across geography and across asset class. So it's multifamily, it's single family, it's raw land and mobile home parks and industrial. Some of it is debt instead of equity. So it's a way to diversify and across timelines too. A lot of the investments that we make are the typical like 4 to 7 year syndications, but some of them are shorter term. Some of them are 1 year, 2 years, because we want that timeline diversification as well. So it's a way. I look at it as a way to practice dollar cost averaging with your real estate investments. Investing month in and month out, regardless of what's going on in the market. Regardless of, not trying to time the market or do anything goofy like that, but just month in, month out, plowing, slow and steadily into the market.
So it sounds very exciting, and I would love to get on. Would it be possible for me to get on a call and listen sometime? Is there a
Absolutely.
cost, I guess, for the audience too? I'm sure they're wondering, is it a cost to join your group, or is there a subscription fee to join your group, or how does that work?
Yeah, there is. It's a membership business. So
Okay.
as an investment club, we charge membership fees. It's $59 a month or $497 a year, whichever you prefer. And we realize that it's not for everybody, right? I mean, this is great for a certain type of person, but it is a form of alternative investments that we're doing. So we have a very generous refund policy. So we encourage people to join the club, show up for a meeting or two. If you decide it's not for you, drop out and we'll refund you, because I mean, we only want people to be in the club who are actually into it and who are actually investing in deals, right? So we get that what we're doing is very new for a lot of people. In fact, that's kind of what we're offering is like my first passive real estate investment. So come join us for a meeting or two, see how you like it. And then if it's not for you, that's cool. You can go do something
Uh,
else.
no, I love it. It's great. So now take, I'd love to hear a couple of examples. So what the product was that you invested in or your group invested in, and maybe how much money you guys earned, each of you. Maybe someone put in 5, someone put in 15, someone put in 100 maybe. So give us some real examples so we can really get a feeling for how this works. It sounds very exciting.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
So, every month it's different, and that is by design. We really want
sure.
to diversify across every one of these axes that we can. So, last month, for example, our March investment was a partnership with a land flipping company. So this company, they actually have two different business models, and I really liked this. So one is the traditional land flipping model where they just go out and they buy parcels of land at a deep discount and then turn around and sell them at full market value, which is a great business model. I love that business model. But they also have a secondary business model that I love because it's recession resilient, and that feels extra pertinent at this moment.
Yes.
um, yeah. So their other business model is they'll go out and they'll buy a piece of land and then they will install a manufactured home on it and sell it as a residential property to a first time home buyer.
Okay.
So, and in the markets where they're operating, they're able to buy the land and install the mobile home and or manufactured home and sell it for about half of the local median home price. So,
Wow. So
so
where
even
is
in a
that?
recession,
Give me an idea of where that would be. I'm in California, so we are so dense and we don't have land really. So not much, but left. So give me an example of where these deals are happening, where they're doing this specific buying the land and
so that particular operator, he's mostly working in North Carolina and I think Florida and maybe Texas. I think he also does a little
okay,
bit of work in California as well, actually.
okay,
Um, but yeah, so in the main market where he operates in North Carolina, the local median home price is around 460,000, and most of the homes that the manufactured homes that they're selling to first time home buyers, they're selling for around 230,000. So even in a recession, there's going to be demand for
right.
entry level homes that are half the median home value, right? That's
Wow.
not going to go away even in a recession. So
So
I really
before you move on, how many people were able to, I mean, coming from California, 2 or 400 isn't much money in our area, but how many investors invested in that one deal, and how much? Let's finish this one. How much did everyone make?
Oh, well, yeah, great questions. Okay, so we had, I think, 61 club members participate in that particular deal, and we invested around 900,000 collectively as a club. Now
Okay,
that's higher than the usual amount that we invest as a club. More often, we're investing, 400, 500, $600,000 a month in different deals. This one was our highest investment to date, which was exciting.
right.
It was very
Very,
exciting.
yeah.
Um,
Congratulations. That's very exciting.
Yeah, and that the way that partnership was set up, we're aiming for total annualized returns in the high teens to low 20s with that flipping partnership. So yeah, and obviously we just started that investment. In fact, we're still
Well, that was
collecting
new.
everybody's money to transfer over to the operator. But yeah, as a general rule in our investment club, we're aiming for mid-teen returns or higher, and then we're looking for risk that is in the low to moderate range. So the way we frame it is we're looking for asymmetric returns. We're looking for those high potential returns with low to medium potential risk, um, because most people have this way of looking at risk and returns thinking that it's one dimensional, it's a line that you've got high returns on the one side and high risk, and then you've got low returns and low risk on the other side, and it's just a linear line, literally one dimension, it's just a line. That's actually not how investments work. That those are two of the dimensions of an investment, but there's a
Mhm.
lot more than just risk and returns. There are other factors at play with investments, such as liquidity, for example. Can you pull your money out at any time? And
Right.
in most of the investments we make, no, it's not liquid at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're tying up your money for 4, 5, 6, 7 years. There's a time commitment. How long is the time commitment? That's another factor in these investments. What's the minimum investment? I mean, you could have the best investment in the world, with very high returns and very low risk, but if the minimum investment is $250,000 and you have $25,000, you can't participate, right? You can't do it.
Right.
And
Right.
and I've seen those. I mean, I've seen very good investments that have a really high minimum investment, and they only cater to the wealthy. Uh,
Mhm.
Along similar lines, a lot of these types of investments, these sort of private equity real estate investments, they only allow accredited investors because of the way that SEC regulations are set up. It makes it much easier for operators to collect or to raise capital from accredited investors. And just for any audience members who aren't familiar with that term, these are wealthy investors, basically people with a net worth of $1 million or more, not including equity in your home. Or you're earning 200 grand or more as a single person, 300 grand or more as a married couple every year. So, yeah, I mean, there's all these other dimensions to investments. There's tax benefits, there's personal
Mhm.
values. For example, the classic example I give for personal values is oil and gas drilling, which has historically pretty high returns and not super high risk, but a lot of people don't believe in oil and gas drilling. They don't want to put their money in it, right? So, there's all these other dimensions to investments beyond risk and returns. And once you wrap your head around that, then you can go out there and you can find investments that have high returns, high potential returns, and low potential risk, knowing that there's all these other factors at play, and you have to be okay with those other factors, right?
Absolutely. So give it, I love that example of what, and I did hear there's a lot of people relocating to North and South Carolina because there's a lot of companies who have moved there. So I hear that's a huge, I was interviewing an agent from there and she said they just are having multiple offers and there is just so many people relocating there. It was incredible. So that, I love that example. So give us another example of an investment that one that you've done and closed and made money on and you were excited about.
Yeah. So we've made 31 investments total as an investment club. Only one of them has gone completely full cycle and closed out. That was a
Okay.
note. It was a pretty short term note, actually. I think it was only 9 months. But that note was paying 15% interest, which was great. So we collected our interest. We got our principal back at the end. But
Nice.
we've done a lot of sort of the vanilla multifamily syndications, just because there are so many of those available.
Right.
When we do those, we try to find some kind of extra downside risk protection. And I'll give you a quick example of one of
Mhm.
those. We invested with an operator who they specialize in buying apartment complexes in Texas, and then they partner with the local municipality to get a huge discount on their property taxes in exchange for setting aside a certain chunk of the property for affordable housing, where it's limited to people earning a certain percentage below local area median incomes and so forth. So in that case, in this particular example, they negotiated for a 50% reduction in their property tax bill in exchange for setting aside 50% of their units for affordable housing designated units. And I mean, that's instant equity because they gained a lot more cash flow from the tax benefit than they're losing from setting aside some of those units for affordable housing. So they were able to create basically instant cash flow from doing that just from day one.
Wow.
Um, so that took a lot of the risk out of it right there. But it also that provides some recession resilience too, because there's a waiting list for
Right.
those affordable housing designated units because they're under market rents. So in a recession, you know, everybody's going to want them even more, right? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Are you doing another project with them?
we would like to do another project with them. We have a rule in our investment club that we never invest with the same operator within 12 months of our first investment with them, because we want to see, how they perform, how's their
Mhm.
communication style, all of these sorts of things. Are they paying distributions the way they said they were going to pay distributions to us? Um, and that particular group, I think that was our May investment of last year. So we're coming up on a year with them, but they have not been eligible for another investment with our club because, yeah, we really want to put people through that probationary period before we're
Yes.
willing to invest with them again,
Right.
just as a protection mechanism for our money
Absolutely.
as an investment
Yes.
club.
Absolutely. And are those distributions monthly or quarterly or yearly or just at the end?
So most syndications and funds pay their distributions quarterly. Some of them will pay monthly, but in our investment club, we so what we do, just from a structural standpoint, we created a new LLC for every deal that we invest in as a club, and then every
Okay.
member who participates gets just listed as a partial owner of that LLC, basically.
Oh,
So
okay.
we create a joint bank account that everyone can view. They've got login access to view the joint bank account. At the end of each quarter, we basically just go out and empty all the bank accounts of all the distributions, and pay them out to each person proportionate to their investment. So even the syndications that pay us monthly, each person in our investment club, they get their portion of it quarterly, because it's just too much administrative work to send out those
Right.
distributions every month for us.
Absolutely.
Uh, but yeah, no, I mean, that is, we do like income producing investments. Occasionally we'll invest in more of those value add deals where someone's buying an apartment complex and just renovating the entire thing, and it's going to take a couple years before there's cash flow. But in general, we like income. we want to start seeing the income relatively quickly from these.
Absolutely.
If for no other reason than it feels good, right? It makes you feel confident about what's going on at the property.
Right.
You get to see the cash flow statements and actually, get your hands on that cash flow and feel good about it.
Right. So how long has Spark Rental been in existence this way with the investment membership club?
So we did those first couple pilot deals that were single family properties. We did those 4 or 5 years ago. In its current form, we've been
Hmm.
doing this for about 3 years.
Okay. And how many deals do you have going on, or how many investments do you guys have going on right now?
We do one a month. So
Okay.
every month we get together and we vet a new investment, and
And
then
how
that
many
closes out.
altogether? Oh, but it doesn't close out in a month. So how many,
No,
like, you have?
the ability to participate closes out, but then the investment, we'll stay open and we'll pay the distributions or the interest or whatever the kind of income is, and then eventually the property sells or the note matures or whatever the case may be, and then we close out that LLC and close out the bank account and just everyone gets
Right.
their portion of the profits. Um, what was the other part of your question?
Well, like, I have 4 listings right now. How many projects do you have right now that I mean, you're managing them. You and your partner must be overseeing 3, 5, 10, 20. How many at a time, right now are you guys handling, managing, overseeing?
30 ones that are in our active portfolio, if you will. I mean,
Okay.
we're not like a fund manager or anything like that. So it's
No.
but yeah, we've done 31 total. Like I mentioned, one of those has closed out completely, and it's
Okay.
it's it's over and done with.
So they're all
The other
neat. They're all right now in existence, 31 of them. Because someone has to, I mean, you guys have to still keep your eye on the ball. You might not be managing them, but you need to make sure everything is, going along smoothly and nothing has happened that you're not aware of. So I was just wondering, that takes some, is it just you and your partner overseeing the 31 at this current time? Or do you have other people that work with you?
Yeah, we have a couple employees. And to your point, there is a lot of accounting and administrative work
Yes,
involved in this because we've got dozens of
absolutely.
LLCs and dozens of bank accounts, and yeah, and then we have to file tax returns for all of those, and we have to, for every one of those, we have to divvy up individual K-1s for each person who participate in it,
Right.
right? So that has been a lot of work, way more work than we thought it was going to be initially. Um, so yeah, so 30 that are like active at the moment, 31 total. One of them closed out, and every month
Okay.
there's a new one.
Right. No, it sounds very exciting. All right, we're going to go to a quick commercial break and we'll be right back with Brian and we will learn more about Spark Rental. It's very exciting. Thank you. Welcome back to Mastering the Art of Real Estate. I'm your host, Debbi DiMaggio. We are here with Brian Knox. He is an international traveler, work from anyone. That's my new name for him. Although he's in Lima, Peru, he does travel about, and he works with his company and his partner on SparkRental.com. And we're learning how we can invest with his group. If you want to join his membership, monthly, check him out. And if you want to stay in and invest, you can continue with your membership. But I think it would be a great opportunity for people to learn how they can invest in putting in smaller amounts, not necessarily huge chunks, but you can start as little as $5,000, I believe. So Brian, with that, let's talk about the different kinds of investments you invest in as a club. I looked on your website and you had quite a list there.
Yeah, so we try to diversify as much as possible. That is one of our core values in our club. And as we mentioned, that goes for everything from geography to operator to investment timeline to the asset type. So on the big picture level, that's debt and equity. I would say that the majority of what we do is equity investments, but we do make debt investments as well that are at a fixed interest rate. Um, on the equity side, we have invested in every type of real estate imaginable. I mean, that's not technically true, but we've done industrial properties. We've done obviously multifamily properties. We have invested in portfolios of single family rental properties. We have invested in hotels, in Airbnb, short-term rentals. We have invested in mobile home parks and raw land, as we talked about. So yeah, I mean, it's really everything across the board. And there's no one perfect asset class, and there's no way to predict the next hot asset class either. And anyone
Right.
who says otherwise is probably trying to sell you on that that next hot asset class, right? So again, we're not trying to time the market. We're not trying to pick the next hot city or trying to pick the next hot asset class. We're just trying to diversify across the board, knowing that that is going to form a bell curve of returns for us over time. We talked about earlier how if you have to invest 50 grand or 100 grand at a time and you're only getting into one, two, three of these, if those happen to be at the bottom left-hand corner of that bell curve where those investments underperform, you're going to be lying awake at night chewing on your fingernails worrying about those investments, right? Whereas if you're spreading out money every single month in different projects and different timelines and different cities and different types of properties, then those returns just form a bell curve where a minority of them are going to underperform inevitably because these are investments, right? Some of them underperform. And then at the other opposite end of the curve, at the far right corner, you're going to have some of these that overperform and hit it out of the park. And then most of them are just going to fill in the middle of that bell curve and, more or less perform as promised. And that's okay. That's a lower stress way of investing, and it's how I prefer to invest.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Let's talk about how you took a red month and traveled to Patagonia with your family. And what is a red month?
Yeah, I wish I could claim credit for that term. I love that term. I can't remember where I heard it, but the idea is basically you take a big red magic marker and just cross a huge
Oh,
X through your calendar and say, I'm not available that month. I'm not available for
wow.
calls or meetings, or don't book anything with me because I'm going to be gone. I'm out of here. So yeah, my family and I took a month and we traveled around Patagonia in Argentina and down into Tierra del Fuego, and we went down to Ushuaia at the very tip of the continent, and we went to Mendoza and did some wine tasting, and we went to see the big glacier in El Calafate, and I did hiking in El Chalten, and it was great. It was wonderful, and I did. I kept up with emails, so I might spend an hour a day or something, just keeping a sort of baseline pulse on the business and
Right.
not being completely out of pocket. So that I didn't have like a
Right.
10,000 emails backed up in my inbox when I got home, but I
Yeah.
wasn't doing meetings or
Right.
active work like that. And it was great. And that's the kind of thing that you can do
Right.
when you run your own business or you're a freelancer. You can do that stuff. And yeah, I mean, and sometimes we talk to our audience about what we call the five freedoms, but two of those freedoms are time freedom and location freedom. Being
Mhm.
able to choose when you work, and being able to choose where you work from. So, yeah, I mean, I think I encourage everyone to just put a little bit more thought and intentionality into their lifestyle across the board, like holistically. Where do you want to live? And it doesn't have to be the same city where you grew up, right? Even though statistically most Americans live within 50 miles of where they grew up. It doesn't have to be that
Right.
way. You don't have to just drift down the current of life and stay living in the same city, right? um,
Right.
so think about what do you want to do for work. A lot of
Mhm.
us have that golden handcuff where we're doing a job that we don't really care for that much. We probably tolerate it, it's probably okay, but is it like fulfilling our souls? For many of us the answer is
Right.
no. um, and that's is that how you want to spend your life? Because we do spend the majority of our waking hours working, or at least doing
Right.
something related to our work. So, think holistically about that stuff. Where do I want to live? What do I want to do for work? What kind of family life do I want? What kind of social life do I want? How do I want to give back? What kind of hobbies and interests do I want? And as you dig into some of that, you can start sketching out a picture of what your perfect life looks like. But it helps to have location freedom and time freedom.
Right. And what were you? There were five, you said. What are your five?
Yeah, so the five freedoms that we talk about, the first is sort of the foundation that you need for any of the others to make any sense at all, and that is freedom from financial stress. Because
Mhm.
if you're laying awake at night worrying about money, none of the rest of it matters, right? Like, like
Right.
you can't proceed up from there. You can't build on top of that foundation if you don't have that
Right.
foundation of freedom from financial stress. And then you have time freedom and location freedom, which we already talked about. The
Mhm.
fourth is work freedom, and that's something that people don't really talk about enough. But the freedom to pursue the work that is most meaningful and fulfilling for you. And there's
Mhm.
no right answer to that, of course. It's different for all of us. But for most of us, it's probably not like the highest paying thing we could be doing, right? You're probably looking at maybe taking a pay cut to do that, and that's okay. And you just have to be willing to wrap your head around that. And that's where having passive income streams from investments, could be real estate investments like the stuff we do, could be other stuff, could be dividend paying stocks or whatever. But having passive income definitely helps. You can buttress your income with that, so that you can take that pay cut. Instead of earning 100 grand a year, maybe you take that pay cut to 75 grand a year doing something you really love. And
Mhm.
maybe you can make up a big chunk of that $25,000 difference with passive income, right? And then finally, the cherry on top is really financial freedom. Being work optional, right? Where you no longer have to work in order to pay your bills. You earn enough passive income from your investments to cover your living expenses. But if you have that work freedom, if you're doing your ideal work, that thing that really lights you on fire and
Mhm.
feeds your soul, or however you want to put it, then you
Right.
don't need financial freedom. That is just a cherry on top, because you're already, even if you reach financial freedom, you're going to keep doing the work that you're doing because you love it so much. So,
Right.
yeah, everyone kind of rushes to that fifth freedom, that the financial freedom, and they think, oh, I got to get there. I'm going to sprint there as fast as I can. And I believe in financial independence as much as the next person.
Right.
But if you're doing everything else in your life right, financial freedom is just a cherry, right? It's just a nice thing to, you know, bask in the glow of, like, because
Absolutely.
you're going to keep living exactly the same way if you're living your ideal life, regardless of
Right.
whether you've reached financial independence or not.
Yeah, as long as you're enjoying the journey to that, and I love it. No, I coach a lot about whatever, whatever that purpose is, follow that passion that will allow you to live your purpose. And yes, at the end of that, if the financial, but as long as you're enjoying the journey and learning, and even if you're making mistakes, but you're learning from those mistakes like you did along your journey, and you're clearly doing what you want, and you're made yourself available to be able to travel and enjoy your life as you're working on your different things. So with that, every time I'm getting my Italian passport, hopefully everything continues to go right in June. I
Awesome.
haven't appointment. It's my parents. This woman worked with my parents. It took them a long time because when their grandparents came over, the names were changed a little bit. So anyway, they got it. So my kids and myself, we have an appointment. Hopefully everything goes all right. But then I think about, and you hear this with people who are trying to live abroad, and you do, for the most part, live abroad. Do you, my one question is, do you have a base in the United States still? And then how do you deal with taxes? I know it's probably different from different countries, but how do you deal with taxes? Are you paying US taxes and the tax in the country you're living? Or how does that work? If you can give it, I know people need to speak to attorneys and they're tax accountants, but can you disclose for you? But if you can give us some idea, that would be really helpful.
Yeah. So as far as a tax home in the U.S., before we left the country, my wife and I moved our legal domicile from Maryland to Florida
Okay.
because Florida has no income tax, and we didn't want to pay income taxes to the state of Maryland if
Okay.
we're not living in Maryland.
Right.
So there's we found a service in Florida that it's a private mailbox service, but you can set that as your legal residency address. It was originally designed for like RVers and yachters and people who
Okay.
don't have a permanent home in the U.S. but they still need somewhere to get their mail, right, and
Right.
register to vote and all that stuff. So we moved our mailing address there and registered to vote there, and we got Florida driver's licenses. So our legal domicile is in Florida now. I don't live in Florida, but that's our legal domicile.
Okay.
As far as the tax piece, so when Americans living overseas can take advantage of the foreign earned income exclusion, which is basically that it changes every year. It goes up based on cost of living, but it's around $115,000 right now, I think, per person, per adult. Your first $115,000 or so is federal income tax free. Now that's your regular income taxes. That does not apply to self-employment taxes. Like I still have to pay self-employment taxes, the double FICA taxes, being a business owner. But regular income taxes, so first 115 grand is tax-free in the U.S. You still have to file a tax return, of course. But for a married couple, that's 230 grand in tax-free income.
Okay.
Now you do still have to pay taxes potentially in the country where you live. Now, there are a few countries out there that don't have income taxes. Like the UAE, where we lived for 4 years, does not have income taxes, or at least they didn't when we were living there. I don't think they've changed that since then. There are a few others as well. Depending on the income, you like I don't report my U.S. income to Peru, for example. I don't file a tax return personally in Peru. My wife does because she works for a school here.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, her income from the school is reported to the Peruvian tax authority. So that's just case by case, country by
Right.
country. How you handle that. But yeah, I mean, there are a lot of advantages being an expat on the tax side.
And how long have you been in Peru, or have you been moving around more or less over the years, or have you been in Peru now for a period of time?
So we've been in Peru for 2 years. We spent 4 years before that in Brasilia, and our daughter was born in Brasilia. Actually, she has a Brazilian passport, Brazilian citizenship. And then the 4 years before that, we were in Abu Dhabi, which was our first international starting point.
Okay. Very exciting. It's so fun. So what do you have are there any negatives to what you're doing, or is it, any kind of, I don't know, anything? I mean, I can think of all the good stuff that would come up, but are there any things that, are might get you down sometimes living abroad and not being, in the United States where you're from and where
Yeah, absolutely. So it's mostly missing the people from back home.
Mhm.
I mean, and missing major life events. I mean, we've missed a lot of weddings and funerals. We've missed, you know, family members being born. My sister's sons being born. We weren't there for that. You know,
Yeah.
and that's hard, no question. I mean, now we've made a huge effort to go home twice a year for about a month at a time. So
Okay.
we spend a lot of time in the US and a lot of time at home with family. And we can do that because my wife works on the school calendar.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Nice.
and international schools, by the way, they do have much longer winter breaks
Right.
for this very reason, because people are
Right.
traveling home to another country. So, they typically have about a month off around Christmas. And then in the summer breaks are maybe a little bit shorter, more like 6, 7 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks. So yeah, I mean, we've gone out of our way to spend a lot of time in the U.S. for that very reason. That component aside, sometimes the social piece, it takes time to make friends and form deep friendships with people in a new country, a new city. Um, and that's easier than others. Yeah. I mean, when we moved to Abu Dhabi, we were incredibly lucky. We formed very close friendships almost instantly, and it was great, especially given that it was our first stop internationally.
Right.
Um, and then in Lima, it was a little bit harder to form closer friendships, and we've done so now. But I mean, it took some time. So there was some loneliness when we first got here.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say those are the biggest things. Yeah, it's about people. No matter where you go in the
Right.
world, people you
Right.
miss from back
No.
home. Feeling like you don't have close people with you in your new home country, and then you do often end up forming very close friendships overseas.
Right.
Both with other expats and sometimes with locals.
Right. And are you part of, so you're in Peru now, are you part of any, is it groups through your kids or your wife's friends, or how are you finding community in right now in Peru, in Lima?
Yeah. So, with my wife, Katie, working for international schools, often we form very close friends with other people who work at those schools.
Right.
Most of the teachers are other expats. They all speak English, of course. So we form friends through her work. There's a group called Internations that
Hmm.
this has chapters all over the world, and it's an expat group, English speaking expat group, that coordinates events, and they'll do dinners and bar nights, and they'll go on hikes together and stuff like that. So yeah, I've done some of that stuff, and then wherever we go, there's usually some. There are always these sort of informal groups as well that they're hard to find, but once you find them, they're gold. So, for
Right.
example, I'm in this WhatsApp group for expat guys called Book Club, which it started as an embassy group where all these women who were working for the U.S. embassy and some of the other English-speaking embassies, they actually had a real book club, and they would get together, and all the husbands would be like, well, what are we going to do while they're all talking about their books? Like, let's go have a beer. So then someone was like, you know what, we're forming our own book club, but it's actually more of a beer club. So we don't actually read any books. Uh, but it has grown into just a group of expat guys who gets
Oh,
together
nice.
for Friday happy hours, and at a local brew pub, and we just get together and unwind after the week, and speak in English with each other, and have a beer, and it's great. So you find, and I've found things like that in just the various countries where we've lived. Like, there's always these sort of informal groups out there if you
Right.
can just tap into them.
Right, right. I love it. No, that's super helpful. So what would you tell, how would you guide, or what would be the first couple steps someone could take if they wanted to move abroad? How would they tidy up their life in America to, if even if it was for 6 months or a year, and then they decided, okay, I want to do this long term. What would you suggest for them? I know there's a lot of people right now uh, very interested in doing just that. So we have a couple more minutes. Please share.
Yeah. So the first step, like we talked about earlier, is find a way to make money from anywhere in the world.
Okay.
Um, that's the biggest thing, because if you don't have that, then you're in trouble, right? Like, you need money, you need income.
Right.
Once you solve that piece of the puzzle, the rest of it is relatively easy. There are a lot of countries today with digital nomad visas that basically say, and make it really easy for people who can earn money remotely to come and live there. And these tend to be relatively shorter term visas, but they get renewed basically automatically as long as you can show that you have a certain minimum amount of income every month. from another country, right? They want you to bring your money to their country and spend it there, right?
Right.
Makes
Right.
total sense. So they've made it really easy for people to do that. You just need to be able to prove your income, and then you can stay for as long as you can earn that income. So yeah, look into some of those countries. That's the easiest starting point. You don't need to go out there and like do the whole citizenship by investment thing, the whole golden visa thing. Forget all
Oh,
that. That's expensive and it's
okay.
time consuming. You don't have to do that. Just find some of these countries that will let you come in as long as you can show income. So that's the residency and visa piece. It's much easier than most people think. And by the way, if you're interested in Europe, look at
Mhm.
Schengen area countries.
Oh,
So
right. Right.
yeah, because then, if you have a residency visa for one of those countries, you can go live in any of those countries. So
Right.
anyway, yeah, the visa piece, not as hard as people think. Like that's not a
Okay.
huge hurdle. Tying up your life back home, that's actually where some of the work comes in. So
Okay.
when my wife and I moved abroad, I owned a house and furniture and all the trappings of middle class life in America, right? We each had cars. I mean, we had all that stuff. So
Right.
we thought when we first moved abroad, we thought, oh, we're just going to go have a little 2-year adventure, and then we're going to come back and just like step right back into our life in Baltimore. And of course, 10 years later, we're still abroad.
Wow.
But we rented out our house furnished as a furnished rental property, and we rented it on a 2-year lease, and that was fine for that first 2 years, and then it wasn't fine after that.
Mm, yeah.
So those tenants were great, but they moved out, and then it was harder to find tenants who wanted to move into a furnished apartment. And then we had people move in, but they didn't treat it very well, and they didn't stay that long. And so eventually we sold that house, and it was sad because I loved that house,
Right.
but we got rid of all of our furniture. We packed away all of our stuff into bins in our parents' basements, basically. um, we sold our cars before we moved abroad, and that was fine. I mean, that just is what it is. And in fact, that is one of the things about moving overseas that no one talks about, but it can make life cheaper and easier. Is that outside the US, most cities are designed for you to be able to live perfectly normal lives without a car.
Oh,
So
right.
when we moved to Abu Dhabi, my wife and I, we managed to, we had that pause where we said, oh, maybe do we actually each need a car? Because as an American, you
Right.
just think, oh, every adult needs to have a car no matter what, and that just is what it is, and you don't question it. We moved abroad, and I was like, well, could we share one car? Like maybe let's try it. And within like 2 days, it became clear that it was going to be fine with just one car. So for 4 years in Abu Dhabi, we shared one car, and then when we moved to Brasilia, which is a very walkable city, we're like, well, do we need any car? Like, could we live without a car entirely? And it was
Right.
great, and we did. We walked everywhere, we biked, we took Ubers, and then we moved to Lima, and we still don't have a car. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, that is one of the perks that no one really talks about. In the U.S., you kind of in most places you need a car.
Right.
Outside of the U.S., there are a lot of places in this world where you can live without a car comfortably,
Yeah.
happily,
You
and
save money
affordably.
on
Ubers,
car, car insurance, all the things that go around. I mean, and then do you get health insurance, I guess? Or how does health insurance work when you're abroad?
yeah. So international schools provide. Well, I mean, they're each different, but most of them provide premium health insurance coverage for the entire family of a worker. So we do get health insurance through my wife's job. That being said, you can get, if you don't have that, you can buy international health insurance for much less than what you pay in the US. And
Oh, okay.
contrary to most Americans' beliefs, the healthcare systems in other parts of the world work just fine. They work just as well as the US, if not better, in most cases. There are exceptions to that,
Right.
of course.
Right. Of
But
course. Of
in
course.
most cases, you get great healthcare for a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, we were in Mexico. We had gotten to Tulum and I forgot my thyroid medicine. And I was panicking, of course, because I have to take a pill every day. And I guess the hotel put us in touch with the doctor or something. We ended up, so I guess I told him what the medication was. Next thing, 50 pills came, which I never get 50 pills. I had 50 pills, and it was like $50 total, including the cab that went to pick it up from the doctor's office. And I said, Adam, this cannot be true. There's something wrong with this. So he went online and he was matching up what the ingredients were and everything. And I was shocked. It was so inexpensive, and it was just seamless, and I got way more than I would in America, and that was in, it was pretty remote in Tulum at that point, and it was 10 years ago. So yes, I agree that it's much better in some of these places than we're made to be aware of. But well, it sounds like an amazing experience in life you're having. And please send me the link to your club. I would love to share it with everyone. And then also, I have a few people that I've met along the way in my podcast over the last year that I would love to connect you, because I know they have investment opportunities to come to mind right away. And I will connect you with those people, and maybe you guys will invest, and maybe I'll join in and invest at the same time. But it's been so wonderful to have you, Brian.
Oh, Debbie, thank you so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun. And I would love to connect with any and all of those operators out there. We are constantly trying to meet new operators.
And how do people get in touch with you? What's the easiest way?
Yeah, so visit our website, SparkRental.com. You'll see our co-investing club front and center on there. You can email us at support@SparkRental.com. You can check us out on Facebook and LinkedIn. You'll find us at SparkRental. Very simple. And don't be a stranger. Reach out. I mean, we are very much a mom and pop business. In fact, one of our 2 employees is my partner's daughter, my business partner's
Aww.
daughter. We're very much a mom and pop company, and we want our investment club to feel close knit, even though it's virtual. We meet online. We want to be a community, and we want people to have that community feel and recognize each other when we hop on calls together. And my partner and I make ourselves available every week in live Zoom calls for whoever wants to show up. So we want to keep that intimate feeling going throughout our entire business.
I love it. It sounds like a really great business you've created, and I wish you and your wife and your daughter well, and I look forward to staying in touch. Thank you so much.
Debbie, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Tune in each week for another episode of Mastering the Art of Real Estate with host Debbi DiMaggio. Here Fridays, noon Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network. Tune in to where real estate matters matter.